So far in this chapter, we have covered the process of passing values through the query string. Clearly, this is a bit limited. There's only so much you can pass through a URI. Next, we reviewed the process of posting information, for example, through a form. In the last two lessons, we talked about using sessions to store user-specific information, such as usernames or emails, things like that. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about cookies. And I want you to think of cookies essentially as just text files that can store a maximum of about 4 kilobytes worth of data. So the most important thing to understand is that you should not use cookies to store private information. They can easily be accessed and edited. Instead, you would use a cookie to store more casual information, like what is a user's preferred category on some blog. And that way, when they return to the website on future visits, you can tailor the experience to, for example, point out articles within that category more predominantly. Or you could store the user screen resolution so you can optimize the experience for them. Maybe even something as small as their preferred font size. That way, maybe if they're a bit older and their eyes have some trouble reading smaller text, you can store that preference, and then upon future visits, you can set the body's default font size equal to what their preference is. Simple, safe things like that are what we can use cookies for. So with that explanation out of the way, let's take a look at how we can create cookies. And we do so using the setCookie function. Now this function technically accepts a lot of parameters. So first we have the name. And you can think of this in the same way as you would name an input. It's just an identifier, a key. It's the way that you will reference this specific cookie's value. The next parameter is going to be the value. So if the name is font size, then the value might be 16 for 16 pixels. The third parameter is the expiration date, and this is important. If you don't specify it, that's fine, you can still do that, but then the expiration date will be essentially the end of the session or when you close the browser. Generally, though, you will want to set it either to anywhere from an hour in advance to a day to even a year, depending upon what kind of data we're working with. And the fourth parameter is going to be the path. And this will be the path on your server where the cookie would be activated. So you can see in this example, if the path was set to /foo, then that cookie is only going to be available on your domain at yourwebsite.com/foo. All right, I don't want to go into any of these others just yet. Let's review an example of using it. So I'm going to switch over to Sublime Text. Let's switch to distraction-free mode, and we're going to set a cookie. So let's stick with that font size idea. So the key, or the way that I'm going to reference it, is font size. Next, what is the value? Well, for now, we're going to set a default of maybe 25, just something to show that that's working. And then the expiration date, I'm going to leave blank for now. And we know that if it's left off, it's going to use the browser session as its expiration date. All right, so that alone, let's come back to Google Chrome. I will reload the page. And now we don't see anything, of course, but I'm going to right-click and choose Inspect Element. I will switch over to Resources, and you see this cookie section right here. So we'll click Localhost. And now we see, yes, we have set a cookie, and the name is font size, the value is 25. So this can be very helpful if you need to see specific values. What is the name? Well, it's font size. What is the value? We set it to 25. Now, one thing that's important to understand, I'll click this and delete it, is that just by setting the cookie, you're not going to have access to that value right away. So, for example, we can access values by using the $_cookie super global array. So I can echo cookie font size. So at this point, we have not set a cookie. The page loads, we set it, and then we try to echo that value out. But as I noted, that's not going to be available to you just yet. So let's reload the page. Notice that we have set the cookie, but we get this undefined index font size. Now, if I reload the page, then that cookie will be sent back to the server. Because think about it, on that first request, you set the cookie, but it hasn't yet been sent back to that server. Then when you reload the page, it's sent back to the server, and we get that value. So we reload it, now we have 25. So then at this point, maybe you could do something like this. Maybe we can open up an HTML bracket, open up style tags, and within here, we'll set the body font size equal to that value that has been saved. So we'll just use PHP 5.4 syntax for echoing, and we will echo cookie font size. And now let's simply echo out a paragraph. Hi there, how are you? Okay, that looks good. I'm going to reload the page, and sure enough, now we have set that value. We can edit this cookie, not by double-clicking. Chrome won't allow you to do that, but if we close this out, we can click on the Edit the Cookie Chrome extension, which you can download, and then you can update the value. Maybe, for example, to 10. Then if I reload the page, now we have 10. Now, if I come back to Chrome DevTools once again and we open up the localhost cookie, I want you to note that expires is set to session, and that's because we did not specify one. It's just going to exist for the life of the current session. So if we want to set an expiration date, the most common way is to specify the interval using quick math. So you could bring out the calculator and figure out how many seconds are in a year, or you can have PHP do the work for you. I'll give you an example. If we're working with seconds, we know there are 60 seconds in a minute. Okay, well, if we do 60 times 60, well, now we're saying 1 minute times 60, or we're going to expire in 60 minutes or an hour. If you wanted to have this expire in 15 minutes, you would do 60 seconds times 15, which equals 15 minutes. Or another option would be maybe you want to expire in a year. So you would do 60 seconds, and there's 60 minutes in an hour, there's 24 hours in a day, and there's 365 days in a year. And now, without having to do the math ourselves with a calculator, we just let PHP do the work for us. But this isn't enough. We have specified how many seconds are in a year, but we need to tell it at what point to begin with. So this is why we usually start with the current time plus 1 year. So now we're saying it's going to expire in whatever the current time is right at this second plus 1 year. Now in our case, let's keep it simple and we'll set it to time plus 60 times 30, which is 30 minutes. And now we've set a cookie for a half an hour into the future. Now, what about the instances when we need to delete a cookie? And this is something that can be a little weird. You might think there's a delete cookie. No, there's nothing like that. Instead, if you want to delete a cookie, a bit oddly, the way you would do it is you set the expiration date to a point in the past, anytime in the past. So an easy way would be, in this case, just replace that plus with a minus. Now we're setting the expiration date to the current time minus 30 minutes, or 30 minutes into the past. Now, if I save that and we come back and reload it, you'll see this site has no cookies because the time was set into the past. Okay, so now we know we can create cookies by setting a key, by setting its value, by setting an expiration date. We can also set a path. If you want the cookie available to your entire domain, just do /. But if this cookie is specific to, for example, maybe the admin section, well, then you would set it accordingly. But for now, we'll just keep it like so. And then the next parameter would be the domain. So example.com would be available to www.example.com, maybe www2, any special prefixes like that. Or if you need to restrict it, you can be explicit. But in this case, we'll stick with example.com or just leave it off entirely, and it will use the current directory of the page as its base. Now, if we're going with the idea that we're setting user preferences, well, it would be nice if we could store these as an array. And what a lot of people don't know is you can do that with cookies. I'll give you an example. Let's comment this out. And now we're going to set another cookie. And this will be prefs for preferences. And now we will do font size like that. And now we're using this array syntax. So the font size will be 25. And then I will duplicate this just a couple times. The next one will be favorite category, maybe. I mentioned that earlier. And then the final one will be screen width or something like that. All right, so now we've set 3 individual cookies. When we load the page, we haven't set an expiration date, so it's just going to use the current session. So we have still set 3 cookies, but the way we have saved them with this array syntax will allow us to interact with them as an array. And that way we don't have lots of different variable names. We only have this prefs name. So let's try this out. Let's come down here at the bottom, open up PHP, and we can say for each cookie prefs as key value. Then maybe we can echo out a list item, and we can echo out the key, then a colon, then the value, something like that. Now if I reload the page, you'll see, yep, we are interacting with that cookie as an array. We're filtering through it and echoing out those values, and then you can insert those wherever you need to in your application. Now in our case, we have font size 25, maybe favorite category is news, and screen width we'll set 1024. There we go, and now that has been updated. But now what happens if I delete all 3 of these cookies? Like that, well, we're still going to try to filter through them, but in this case it won't exist, and yep, we're going to get this notice, undefined index preferences. I'd have to reload it again after the cookie has been set. And that's why it's a good practice to first make sure that you have access to it. So you would do something like this. If is set cookie prefs, only on that condition should you then run your for each statement like this. And let me add that missing parentheses. That looks good. So now when I come back and I reload the page, that's working just fine. But if I delete these and I reload the page, we're not going to get a warning because what's happening is this test fails. So then we never run anything in here at all. And of course you can add an else statement if you need to, but we're not going to worry about that in this case. Now the next security point is because cookies can be edited by anyone, you still should perform the necessary amounts of sanitation. So in this case, I would still run it through HTML special chars like that, and anywhere I would reference those values like so. Now we're going to get the same thing, but we're being just a bit more safe, and that's a good thing. So to finish up this lesson, let's continue on with the font size idea and maybe give the user the ability to specify what the font size should be. Okay, well that should be fun. I'll create a new file called font.php, and we'll open up PHP and we'll add my HTML at the top. I'll add a doc type. And now the first thing will be that the user needs to have the option to specify what the font size should be. So the method is going to be post, that's fine, and it should post to the current page, that's fine. So within here, what should we give them access to? Well, they need to specify a font size. So we could say something like form L, font size, your preferred font size. Now within here, I don't really want an input. Instead, I'm going to stick with a select. And we'll do font size, and within here we'll add an option. The value will be 10, something like that. Let's try this out in the browser. I'll switch over to font. Okay, so now we have your preferred font size, and then we have, for now, just one key. I'm also going to delete these cookies. Good. Next, after the label, we'll add a break tag. We'll add some styling, and for the list item, we'll set list style none. And for the UL and LI, let's set margin 0 and padding 0. Okay. All right, that looks good to me. We're not really doing CSS here. We just wanted something slightly cleaner. There we go. Now let's just add the rest of our values. So we'll do just a handful more just for the example. So we'll have 30, 40. Not really practical. You would probably use smaller increments, but just so we can easily see the differences. All right, so now we've set this up. Your preferred font size, and now they have 4 different options to choose from. The final thing is we need some kind of page to work with. So my page, and within here, let's just add some lorem text like that. Okay, that looks good to me. So now they've set their font size, but they need a way to submit the form. So we'll do one more form element. We'll do form submit. The type is going to be submit, and the value will be submit. Reload the page, and of course we don't want the label. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so it's not very pretty at all, but this will do just fine. So we have your preferred font size. I'm going to click 30, I'll click submit, and that's simply going to post to the current page. Now we need to capture that value, and assuming that this is a big website, we're going to set a cookie and store it that way. All right, well at the very top we can say if server request method equals post. In that case, we're only working with one form on the page, so we can be a little bit generic like that. Then we know the form has been posted, and let's just print our post to see where we are. Reload the page, choose 30, submit, and now we get that array. The next step is to capture this font size value and set a cookie with it. So we will do set cookie, font size. The value is going to be post font size. And we'll set the expiration date to the current time plus 60 times 60 or 1 hour. Now, because I'm going to expect font size to be a number, I'm also going to cast that to an integer as we learned in a previous lesson. Okay, so now let's see if this worked. I'm going to open up Chrome DevTools, go to Resources and Localhost, reload the page. Now I'm going to make a selection, submit, and now we have set this new cookie with the value of 40. Now, at this point, within your style sheet or wherever you want to, we're being a little bit sloppy here, but that's okay. Let's put each of these on their own line. Now we can say, at the top, we're going to set the body's default font size equal to, and then we can do cookie font size. And because this is going to be an integer, let's also tack on pixels. All right, so that's a first step. Let's reload the page. And now we have set 40, so that's been adjusted. And that will exist for all of these page loads, like so. Now I'm going to set it for 10. I'm going to click Submit, and notice that it's not taking effect, but if I reload the page, now it is. And remember, when you're setting these cookies, they won't instantly take effect. Also, you have the idea that if we come back to Resources, Localhost, and we delete the cookie, what will happen if we load the page? I will view the source, and now notice that we're getting body font size. Notice undefined index font size. So remember, when you're working with these cookies, you can't blindly assume that they're going to be available. In this case, we could maybe use the ternary operator, is set cookie font size. If that's the case, then we're going to echo that value plus pixels. Otherwise, we're going to set a default of 16 pixels, something like that. Now I can reload the page. If I view the source, we set that value to 16 by default, because what happened here is we ran our test and we're going to echo out, well, is that cookie font size key available? If it is, question mark, think of that as a question. If so, then we're going to echo out cookie font size and px. Otherwise, if that value is not set, then let's fall back to a default of 16 pixels. That looks good. Now we're going to set a font size of 20. I'm going to submit it, but remember, it's not going to take effect just yet, and I want to fix that. But if I reload the page, now it does, and that will exist for each page load leading up to an hour. And then it will default back to 16 pixels again. But now in this case where we have that situation where they set a new font size, but it doesn't show immediately, what we could do if you wanted, and I'm just doing this off the top of my head, so work with me, is we could say something like if is set post font size, then we know the form has been posted. So then maybe we'll set font size equal to that value. Else if is set cookie font size, then set font size equal to cookie font size. But now, what if neither of those are true? Well, then you could say else font size equals 16. Then at the bottom, we can remove all of this and say echo font size, like that. Okay, so let's come back and see if that code alone will do the trick. Localhost, get rid of the cookie. I'm going to reload the page. It's set to 16 pixels because 1 has not been set, but I should add pixels onto that, shouldn't I? So we'll do it right here, plus pixels, like that. Okay, one more time. Now we get the default. That's good. We're going to set a value of 30, submit. Now that value is automatically updated on the page, and then when we reload the page, it's going to use the cookie value. Let's do it one more time. Bring it back to 10. That looks good. Bring it up to 40. Yeah, that's working exactly like we would want. So the final step is we can clean this up. If you want, you can pause this and see how you could refactor it. Now this was a bit of a trick question. Really, this is fine. It's a bit verbose, but it does what you need, and you could abstract that way to a function. Or you probably would never do this. It's a bit of an example. Or you could use the ternary operator, or you could simply reload the page. So for example, we've set the cookie, and if you absolutely need that value to take effect, you could also just run header location is font.php. That would work. And then at the bottom, you would echo out cookie font size. So let's keep it there for now. Reload the page. That's been updated. Let's change it to 10, submit, and now we are reloading the page. And because the headers haven't been sent, that should be just fine. Go back to 10. That looks good. Now, as I noted though, we don't want to depend on the fact that this value is available and hasn't been tampered with. So why don't we do font size equals is set cookie font size. If so, that's the value that we're going to use. Otherwise, we're going to use a default of 16 pixels. That looks good. And let's go ahead and tack on px there. And now at the bottom, we would echo out font size and append our closing semicolon for when you add a CSS block. So that's not the closing PHP statement, that's the closing CSS rule. All right, so let's try that one out. Reload the page, change it to 20. There we go. That's better. And the final thing would be to run that through HTML special chars if we just want to be super careful. So one more time, change that to 10, 20, 30, and that's been updated. Granted, this has been a bit of a random example. It's mostly to show you how you could have an area where users could set values. You could then take those values and create cookies that will be used for anywhere up to a year from the point they visit. And this can be really helpful. Think about maybe you have some kind of news aggregator and you want people to log in and specify what their favorite types of news are. I'm interested in entertainment or tech or web development. I can check those boxes. Cookies will then be set. And then when I view the website in future weeks or months, then it will know that it needs to make those categories that I specified dominant in the article results. And that's just one example. So have a think on different ways you could use cookies, but that is going to finish it up for this chapter. So you've learned how to pass values around in lots of different ways. You did the query string, you posted values, you used sessions for more secure user-specific data, and you've learned to use cookies for safer preference-like options. If you have any questions at all, just come on over to touchplus.com/forums and ask your question. I'm always on there every day. Lots of your classmates are as well, so we'll definitely do our best to help you. Okay, see you in the next lesson.